Welcome in this new series of video in which I'm going to advise you several recent Asian films, and we will start with this month with Japanese films. So just to make it clear, when I'm saying recent films, I'm meaning films which are no more than 4 to 5 years old. In this case, the oldest film I'm going to introduce was made in 2016. Also, when I'm talking about recent Japanese films, I'm not going to talk about the most famous one. I'm not going to advise you to watch some Koreeda films or to watch the Kenshin trilogy. Not that they are bad films, on the opposite, they are, on the contrary, they are actually very good films. But I think they are already famous enough, they already had enough, they already made enough noise through magazines, through video, through festivals. They are basically known enough, so if you are interested in Japanese cinema, you are certainly already aware of them, and you will automatically check them by yourself. So the intent of this video is to shed light on films which are less known. So that's what I'm going to do there with 5 of them. And so I'm going to start with a film which was made in 2016, and it's called The Golden Orchestra, directed by Toru Hosokawa. So Golden Orchestra is the story of an office lady who is a bit frustrated in her job and who has a passion for classical music. And she learned music when she was younger, but she gave up at some point. And she wants to restart this passion of her. And for that, she gets into a local orchestra, an orchestra from her city. But she makes a mistake, and she ends up in a very casual orchestra made up of retired people whose knowledge and expertise in music is very, very limited. And so this film follows the classical sport film formula. The sport film formula, in my opinion, is a bulletproof formula. If you do it well enough, you are guaranteed to have a good enough film. It may not be a masterpiece, it may not be great, but it will be at least good. And so what is this formula? It's very simple. It's you put this set of characters which are all very special, which have all their own characteristics, their own individualities, and you put them together. And of course it's a mess at the beginning, but at some point they are going to share a common goal, and they are going to unite, and they are going to become better, and they are going to be able to achieve the goal that they have set up for themselves. So that's basically the sport formula, and you have probably seen it with many kind of sports, be it baseball, football, I'm meaning here soccer, or basketball. I mean, whatever, anything, any sports work, and I would say any social activities work as it does work here with classical music and orchestra. So the film is follow this formula, and so by doing so, it succeeds in achieving its result, that being a light comedy full of good vibes, full of good intentions. So something quite light but well made, and which keeps you entertained and which gives you good vibe. So that's a success. But I would say that what makes it a bit better than average is the presence of the actress playing Chizuru, the office lady of the main character, the office lady I was talking about. And this actress is Anne Watanabe. She is the daughter of Ken Watanabe, which you may be familiar because he is basically the Japanese actor to use when you are doing Hollywood production. That's the one they are going to use in almost all their films, from The Last Samurai to the Godzilla, American Godzilla series. And so she's the daughter of Ken Watanabe, and she's a former model. There have been many models who have moved to cinema with some success. So it's not that surprising that she managed, but quite often models are not that successful when it comes to comedy, because in order to do comedy you need to have a capacity of making fun of yourself, of showing yourself in the worst light possible, in looking ridiculous basically, and that goes against what many of the models are. And so that's why I think not many models are able to move to comedy with success. But Anne Watanabe actually managed. She's really very good at playing this character who is a bit clumsy, who is a bit unlucky, living in her own world. She really brings something very warm to the character, which make us emphasize to her, and which really make us like her. And by being able to project this image, and by being able to really make the character so sympathetic, we tend to be more invested in the film and in the story, and so we react even better to the comedy aspect or the dramatic aspect. And so she's really one of the good surprise of the film. And so for all these reasons, I would really recommend the Golden Orchestra. And if you like this kind of formula, this kind of sport film formula, there are two other recent films, Japanese films, which I can recommend you if you want more. First one is Let's Go Jets, which is the same spirit but with pom-pom girls. That may sound a bit weird, but it's really a nice film too, with a bit of a coming into adulthood theme as well. And you also have another film called Mix, which is about ping pong, table tennis, with mixed table tennis with one female, one male in each team. And so you can already guess, I think, the romantic comedy dynamic that there will be in this film. And this film is also nicely done when it comes to this sport film formula. So yeah, Golden Orchestra, well, warmly recommended. And if you want more, go also check Let's Go Jets and Mix. The second film I want to recommend is actually a duology. It's the Gintama duology, directed by Yuichi Fukuda in 2017 and 2018. So Gintama, it's an adaptation of a very famous manga in which feudal Japan has been invaded by extraterrestrial, and they have basically taken over this Japan, and you would see all these feudal aspects of samurais, this kind of stuff, being in the same places as some extraterrestrial with weird technology, and so all this living together. And the Gintama manga are actually comedy manga. It's really made for laugh. It's not that serious. I must confess, I haven't read the manga, so I cannot say if the Gintama films are good adaptation of the manga or not. But what I can say is that the Gintama films are very, very funny films. It's a kind of humor which is completely over the top. It's super crazy, a bit reminiscent on what they do sometimes on Japanese TV or from the Moleito, so the Cantonese comedy by Stephen Chow in the 90s. It's really, really stupid, but really, really funny. So if you like this kind of humor, and personally I really recommend it, because often when we watch comedy, we would smile, or we would have a very weak laugh, a bit of something like that. And I think it's actually quite rare when you are really a real laugh, when you are really laughing out loud, when you are watching comedy. And that was the case for me when I watched Gintama. When it comes to the two films, I would say the first film is probably the best one, because it has a real story to tell. It has a story to follow. It's not just a series of gags, a series of jokes. And that's a bit the trap in which the second film fall into. It's much more disjointed. Having said that, I would still recommend for you to watch the second film, especially if you watch and you liked the first film, because there are still some very, very good jokes. There is, for example, one which I'm not going to spoil, but I'm just going to say that's when the emperor go to have a haircut, and this scene is I really could not stop laughing when I watched it. It was so crazy, and just thinking about it, I'm already laughing inside. So yeah, if you want a crazy comedy made with a fairly big budget and some famous actors too, Gintama is a really good recommendation. Third recommendation is Sekigahara, directed by Masato Harada. Masato Harada, I think, is a very good Japanese director who unfortunately has never been recognized at his correct value, in my opinion. He directed films such as Kamikaze Taxi, Bounce Goggles, Gunhead. Gunhead is a bit of a weaker effort, but he has directed many very good films, and he has also a real unique sensibility, because he has lived a long time overseas, and he has another perspective on Japanese things. So he is very aware of Japanese mentality, culture. Of course, he is Japanese, but by having lived a long time overseas, he's able to have a very unique perspective on Japanese culture, and that's always very interesting to watch. And when it comes to Sekigahara, that's an adaptation, a recreation of the very famous historical battle, which was the end of the Sengoku era. So the Sengoku era was a time in Japan where there was a kind of constant civil war between different daimyo wanting to unite and to control Japan. So you had people like Oda Nobunaga, then Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and in this case the battle of Sekigahara was between the heir of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Hideyori, who was a young boy, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, who ended up winning the battle and whose family would become the shogun for the decades to come until the Meiji Restoration. So it's a very important historical period for Japan, and it has been dealt with in many ways through books, films, manga, animation. So all these characters which I mentioned have been reinvented, have been used for popular culture in Japan. When it comes to Sekigahara by Masato Harada, that's a more realistic approach. So it's a very well handled historical recreation, very serious in trying to be faithful to the time period. What is also interesting is that he's trying to show another light to the opponent of Tokugawa Ieyasu, and that was Mitsunari Ishida. And of course, as Sekigahara ended up being won by Tokugawa Ieyasu, the version of events we have tends to be more flattering for Ieyasu rather than Ishida. And Harada provide here a different perspective on Ishida, which is very interesting, because he shows him as someone with very strong values. I mean, he really wants to do what is good for Japan. He really is selfless. He doesn't work, he doesn't fight in order for his own personal gain, but because he really thinks the side is following, the side is fighting for is the right for the country, and he's someone quite honest, and that's quite refreshing to see such a depiction of this character, and that makes it, of course, even more dramatic, because you know he's not going to win the battle. But so that makes it a unique perspective. That's one of these unique perspective which Masato Harada is able to bring when he does film in Japan. He also Ishida has also a bit of a modern side. I mean, it seems like he's ahead of his time, already kind of embracing values which would be more in line with what would happen during the Meiji Restoration or later. And of course, being the recreation of a very important and epic battle, you have epic battle scenes, and they are very well handled by Masato Harada. Personally, I have a bit of a pet peeve when it comes to big battle in cinema. I love them, but I'm most of the time extremely frustrated about big scale battles, because directors, and most of the time I would say Hollywood directors, but unfortunately that tends to be the case also with foreign directors, but so most of the time when they do battles, it's always the same configuration. You would have some kind of introduction for each army, where you would see them, you would see their big scale, you would see they have a lot of people, great, and then they would basically rush against each other, and it would become a big melee where everybody is fighting one against one, a big mess basically, and that's not how battle were made. I mean, maybe that was how it was during the prehistoric time, but very quickly men, and especially generals, learned that they could not just rush on fight like this, and they needed strategy in order to win their battle. And so the most important aspect when you are doing a battle like this is the strategy that you have, and you need to be able to have some kind of trap, to be able to use your environment, to use the different units you have, and you have to find ways in order to lure the enemy. I mean, there are a lot of things. The strategical aspect is the most important when it comes to this kind of big battles, and it seems filmmakers are unable to apprehend that. Either they don't understand that aspect, either they find it too hard to show in a film, which I can understand, because indeed in order to make people understand very quickly what are the objectives, what are the strategies, that's not an easy thing to do. I understand that, that's true. But still, I think it's something you have to do when you are doing this kind of big scale battle. You cannot just have people fighting like in a melee for 20 minutes. That's stupid. And at least in Sekigahara, Masato Harada tried to have a bit of this strategic aspect. It's not the main aspect of the battle, but it's there, and I think that elevates the battle compared to others which have been done. But of course you still have your fighting between samurai, I mean duel and using their katana, I mean all you can expect from a battle, but with also a bit of strategic and political aspects, which makes the battle much more exciting in my opinion, and much more interesting. So yeah, Sekigahara, Masato Harada, very good film if you want historical film, if you want big battles, Japanese style, go ahead, you are not going to be disappointed. The fourth film I want to recommend is a bit of a tricky case. Its title is Parallel World Love Story, and it was directed by Yoshitaka Mori in 2019. My problem with this film is that I think you can really appreciate it if you go completely virgin of any information. I'm just going to do a very basic concept of the story, but it's not going to spoil anything. It's basically a love triangle between two men and a girl, and from there on there are going to be some complication. The effect the film has is basically the same as if you have watched Perfect Blue by Satoshi Kon. That's the kind of movie which, through its editing and through its direction, but mostly through the editing, it's going to confuse you, and it does it on purpose. So in order to really appreciate it, in my opinion, you need to know nothing about it. You don't read anything about its story or anything. Don't read any review. Just go in it virgin of any information, and be aware that it's going to be confusing and you will need to be concentrated on the story, on the film, in order for you to understand. But if you do this effort, you will be able to get all the pieces of the puzzle and you will understand what is happening at some point. And because you have made the effort to understand what happened, you are going to be much more involved in the story and you will feel the drama much more than if you had watched any other films. The drama and the romantic aspect as well. So I really think that's a film which deserves the effort, but just be aware of it. So don't plan to watch it like you are going to watch a Hollywood blockbuster or a Marvel film or doing some other thing at the same time. In order to really appreciate it to its full value, you will need to be committed and you will need to really use your brain and try to see what the director is doing. But I think the effort is worthwhile, so I would recommend Parallel World Love Story. And the last film I want to advise you to watch is called Bento Harassment, directed in 2019 by Renpai Tsukamoto. What is the story of Bento Harassment? So it's basically a widow who is raising her two daughters, and she has a lot of problems with the last one, who is having a teenage crisis. And because of this teenage crisis, there are big problems of communication between the mother and her daughter. And in order to solve these problems, the mother decides to use the bento that she's cooking for her daughter to eat when she goes to school. And she's going to use this bento in order to put the message, the information she wants to tell her daughter and which she's unable to say directly. So it's a very interesting concept, very, very creative, and very well handled by Renpai Tsukamoto. Especially if, like me, you like bento, you are going to love the film because you will see a lot of very creative and very interesting bento. I'm going to do a little bit of a side note there, but I cannot advise you more if you go to Japan. If you go to Japan and if you are going to take the Shinkansen, I advise you strongly to buy your lunch or dinner in one of the train stations. You will see in Japan there are a lot of shops providing bento, and so you should, in my opinion, buy one of those bento and eat it in the Shinkansen. That's one of the most enjoyable experience you can have when you are in Japan. Well, I mean, there are a lot of good things you can do in Japan, but I really enjoy personally, and each time I go to Japan and I take the Shinkansen, I'm always looking forward to the bento I will be able to buy and to eat in the train. So if you like me, you like to do these kind of things, then you are going to like Bento Harassment as well for the bento aspect. But the bento aspect is not the only good aspect. I mean, the human drama is also very well handled and very, very touching. It's a comedy, a dramatic comedy. So it's mostly comedy, but there are also some drama elements, and all of them fuse very well. They are very well mixed, and I think that's thanks to the director Renpai Tsukamoto. Renpai Tsukamoto is a really interesting director. He mostly comes from TV, but he has done already several films before Bento Harassment, and is very modern in his approach. He's really able to play with the codes, able to bring some creativity and inventivity in his films and making them very dynamic. It's always very well handled when it comes to the rhythm. If you like what he does, he actually also did another film a bit older, which I really enjoyed, which was called 700 Days of Battle, Us versus the Police, which was about a group of teenagers declaring war with the only policeman that there is in the little Japanese town, and it's not a real war. It's a joke war. So they are trying to beat him with jokes, and it's a very funny film, a bit similar to the animation Kim and Gumi, if you are familiar with it. So it has a bit this spirit, and Bento Harassment has the same visual qualities, especially when it comes to the dynamism and the editing. In a way, I think Renpai Tsukamoto is similar to someone like Edgar Wright. He's probably not as talented and as virtuose as Edgar Wright is, but it's a bit the same spirit. Someone very modern, someone who is really able to use the cinematographic techniques at their best. And there are two other aspects which I think make Bento Harassment a very strong recommendation. One of them is the fact that they chose to shoot it in the island of Ashijo. And Ashijo is an island which belongs to the Tokyo district, but of course it's much further than Tokyo. I mean, it's several tens, if not hundreds of kilometers away. And so it's an island which has been actually shown in some YouTube video. I can recommend you the video by John Daube from Only in Japan on Ashijo, where he spends several days there, and you have the opportunity to see the island very well. Maybe I will put a link in the description. And so this island really brings a different atmosphere to the film. It makes it a bit more laid back, a bit more like a beach atmosphere in a way. And I think that helps make the film good. The film could have been made anywhere. It could have been set in Osaka, in Tokyo, in Nagasaki, whatever. I mean, it could have been made anywhere. But choosing to make it in Ashijo adds another layer in the story, in my opinion, and it also makes it more visually appealing. And that comes to another aspect which I really like about the film, is the photography. And I really appreciate the photography here because it's very colorful. The colors are really bright. We really can appreciate them. And that's not something you see often in Japanese cinema. Actually, starting from the early 80s and until I would say the early 2010s, most of the Japanese films were using this kind of very dull, very grayish photography, which makes them look like TV movies. And it became kind of the standard from the industry during those 30-40 years. And I find it very annoying. I think it really makes the film look less interesting. And there is for several years now a tendency for the Japanese director of photography to try to go against that and to make things more colorful. And we find that in Bento Harassment. And that's really something I appreciate a lot. And once again, that really helps make Bento Harassment an even better film. Here there are five recommendations of recent Japanese films. I hope this presentation will push you to watch some of them, and don't hesitate to put your opinion about them in the comments or ask any questions if you have. I will keep doing this series of video, and I will do another one probably on Hong Kong or China very soon. So I will see you very soon on the next video.